Well, hello, freedom fighters, patriots throughout Saskatchewan, across the country, and around the world. Good to see you all tonight. This is a big show. It, I can't even begin to explain how this is going to lay the foundation for some pretty significant changes coming our way. And again, it's one of these things that's going to be in the hands of the people where it all needs to be. Um, Tonight, I have the author, the original author of the declaration that I touched on a little more than a week ago. Um, and all of that has been worked out to the point where Brenton Froelich, my next guest, has created a Facebook page called the True North Declaration. I encourage you to um, go and like that page and become part of that group over there. And they've released the declaration for everybody to read and to consume and to share. And it's incredibly important what this is going to lay the foundation for. So this is something that, of course, the Buffalo Party in Saskatchewan is going to be putting forward to our membership at our AGM on April 1st and 2nd. And so is the case with the Alberta Independence Party with Archer Pawlowski and Bob Leon. They're going to be putting it forward at their AGM, which happens to be on the same days as ours, April 1st and 2nd, in Alberta. So that's the first step. And of course, we're going to be encouraging our members to vote in favor and to ratify this into policy so we can start moving this forward. And obviously, we're going to get into some of this discussion tonight with Brenton, but we're going to need some other provinces and some people to get involved provincially across the country to make this work according to the amending formula. But without any further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Brenton Froelich. Brenton is the author of the declaration that we're speaking of and that we're going to turn into policy with the Buffalo Party. So welcome aboard, Brenton. Good to see
Hey,
you.
thanks for having me, Mark. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, Probably a long time coming. How long have you been at this now? It's been a while, I assume.
Yeah, so the I guess the declaration really got birthed out of the aftermath of the Freedom Convoy. I kind of touched on it in the video that I released today on Facebook. And
Right.
when you know, I'd have never been more proud as a Canadian watching that convoy roll across the country.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I get misty eyed just thinking about it.
Yeah, me too. And so, the feeling of patriotism that millions of us felt, and beyond patriotism, hope. We actually were like, hey, maybe this is a real turning point for people in Canada, that at least look at the world from the way we look at it, as people
Mm.
that love freedom and independence. And when the convoy got shut down by the federal government, I was I was angry. You
Yeah.
know, if there
As
was
we all were.
if there would have been a bar fight somewhere for me to participate in, it would have been an amazing brawl.
Right.
But
Right.
I love to write, and I went down to my basement and pulled my computer up, and I just started to pour my heart out of just as someone that loves Canada, someone that loves freedom, and just kind of start to express myself through the lens of history, and through the lens of someone that believes that all of us have naturally endowed and inalienable rights, and what that has looked like in the context of Canada's history. And so
100%.
13 months later, um, well, I guess in early February of this year, maybe the middle of February, probably about a month ago, I had met Salim Mansour at an event in Kelowna.
Mm.
And I briefly spoke with him and grabbed his email address because I was like, I need to talk to this guy at some point. And because in his talk, it was obvious he had a real grasp of not just Canadian history, but world
Right.
history
Yeah.
and a real deep understanding of a lot of the ancillary issues. And
Mm.
so I reached out to Salim, and he immediately responded back and said, we need to talk. And so it was great. We went back and forth, and he encouraged me, and he said, Brent, it's too long.
Mm.
And it's like, and it was 3,500 words at that point. So it was
Right.
more like a chapter of a book.
Sure.
And so I pared it back to just over 1,000 words, which was a little bit too lean, and
Mm.
it didn't have the meat on the bone that I wanted to communicate.
Sure.
And so I bumped it back up to about 1,300, and it's just been kind of spell check and punctuation after that. But when I started drafting it, I had no real idea what I would do with it.
Mm.
It was just literally, you know, just a simple guy pouring out his heart on
Well,
a perspective,
and this is what I love about it, Brenton, because when I read it the first time, I said to myself, "Yes, this is exactly." It's like you reached into my brain and pulled it out and put it on paper. Phenomenal what I saw there, because this is something, and I'm sure this is something that you've actually thought of well before the convoy, based on what I've read and what I in this declaration, because it's something I think that I've thought about this for a very long time, and how we're going to address the problems of just confederation and try to keep this country whole, and what we're going to have to do in order to make that happen. And so as I say, you must have been having this in your wheelhouse even before the convoy.
Uh, yes and no. Um, I've always been interested in politics. I grew up in a very political household. My grandfather was a member of parliament for British Columbia, representing the Social Credit Party back in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
And in fact, my copy of the Canadian Constitution is his original copy that he was given as an MP. Um, and so I've always had a deep interest in politics, and I like to think about complex problems. And love to read a lot of old literature. A lot of the old stuff from Thomas Jefferson and guys like John Locke and Hooker and
Right.
Rousseau
100%.
and people from the Enlightenment period. And they have it's like Jefferson never arrived at the conclusions that he arrived at by himself.
Right.
We always build upon people before us, right? And so yeah, there was a lot of different ideas that have floated around in my mind for a long time, and it's kind of come together to what we have as this True North Declaration.
Right. And so, as I said, when I first read it, it's like, yes, this is what we need. This is how we move forward. We've been exposed over the last 3 years to tyrannical governments, whether it's our federal government, whether it's our provincial governments. And it seems to me that this declaration, when I first read it, it's like, yes, this is it. This is what we have to do. We have to embrace this. We have to inspire people to get behind it. We have to motivate people to get involved, and take back our responsibility, because a lot of where we're at is because of our inaction and our complacency as a society. We've sort of taken our freedoms for granted. They were all handed to us by people before us who sacrificed everything for our freedom. Yeah. And so, I'm sure you share the same feeling that your hope that this declaration inspires people to get involved and to help turn this thing around. And I mean, my own personal experience, this is 100%, this declaration that you've put together. It just speaks to everything that I, as an individual, as a freedom fighter in this country, have gone through. And I'll share a little bit of that with you. So I ended up with 11 tickets in Saskatchewan for gathering outside with more than 10 people. And, like you and like many others in Canada, it's like, hey, wait a minute, I have a Charter of Rights and Freedoms, but as we've discovered through this process, that governments aren't bound by Section 1, where it says they have to justifiably or demonstrably justify their actions and the limitations to our rights as written in the Charter. So it's kind of they're out. Where the government is now shown, and Salim says this very well, where the government is shown to be supreme and sovereign. And that's exactly what our Constitution has been about since 1867, when it was handed to us by the British system.
Yeah.
It gives Parliament that sovereignty and supremacy over the people. And we don't have a constitution that reflects the will of the people. No. And that's what we so desperately need in this country.
Yeah. I think, I agree with everything that you said. And kind of if you break the Declaration down into some main themes, the first one is that, and this is where, we need to educate Canadians, and they have to decide whether they're going to take the red pill or the blue pill, right? Like Neo in the Matrix. So we've been lied to for generations.
Yeah.
The Constitution, on the very first page, it just declares very clearly in really nice, it's a nice font actually, but it says that the Constitution was drafted to serve the interests of the British Empire.
Right.
End stop.
100%.
And so we grew up in a culture, in a society where our rights were assumed. But the Declaration just lays out a really clear, rational argument that we've been lied to. Because in Canada, Parliament is supreme. It basically has the role of, pre the Glorious Revolution in England, which ended the divine right of kings. Well, we have the divine right of Parliament in Canada. And there is no such thing as a true right or a true freedom in Canada. We have privileges that are granted at the political whim of Parliament. And as we saw during the COVID crisis, that privileges can be granted to certain political groups at the expense of others. If you're not vaxxed, we're not going to grant you those privileges anymore. Right. 100%. We're going to fire you from your job, and so on and so forth. So, Canadians, I think the biggest thing that I want people to come out of this declaration, the number one thing is the Canadian people have been lied to. People need to ponder that really carefully, because, none of us like being taken for a fool, right?
Right, 100%.
If you invest in something and it goes sideways, no one really wants to talk about it.
Well, and I think a major issue here that people have to come to terms with is again this idea that Parliament, even as recent as 1982, issued us our rights. They gave us our rights, which means whenever they determine, and whatever the whim is of government, they can come and take those rights away, because they're not inalienable. They're not God-given as I see them. Yeah. And I've always looked at my rights as my rights, inalienable, God-given rights. Yeah. And that's how I look at this. And that's why this declaration, I think, is just so incredibly important and can really inspire people to get behind, because it's now and here where we can change the whole landscape of our country and put the power back into the hands of the people where it belonged right from the beginning.
Yeah. So we have, you're correct, we have legal rights in Canada, which ultimately is just a privilege. Because if it's not a true right, something that, if someone can take something away from you, it's not yours.
Exactly.
Right? And it's an interesting, a little bit of a thought process for people. But if you take the example of the topic of human rights, and Canada is really great at, telling other countries in the world that they're violating human rights.
Right.
And, which is a good thing. But what there's an argument that comes out of that is, okay, so what is a human right?
Mm.
And, of course, the UN Declaration of Human Rights, it dates back to 1948. It's actually a pretty appalling document, in my opinion.
Mm.
But if you take the idea of human rights and go, okay, well, if there is such a thing as a human right, by definition, it has to be universal. And if it's universal, it can't stem from any parliament,
right,
or any Republican government, or from any king or any potentate, because the leader in Venezuela, he cannot endow humanity with human rights.
Right.
Trudeau can't do that, and neither can Biden. And George Washington couldn't do the same thing. So if you follow the bouncing ball and you come to the conclusion that there is human rights, which I believe most people do believe, by definition, they are inalienable.
Yes.
Because they weren't granted by a government, and therefore
exactly.
they can't be taken away. And so,
right.
The Canadians, we need to realize that we've been lied to. We need to realize that we have inalienable rights that Parliament did not grant them. Whether you want to call them God-given or natural, or however you want to settle that in your own heart. People, everyone has a freedom to do that. But if you believe in that, then the next step is, okay, then what? Because Parliament doesn't agree with you. So you end up with this position of, okay, so now what do we do about that?
Exactly, 100%. So I'd like to, at this time, and then we can carry on the discussion a little further after but I'd like you to read the declaration for us, and and I'm going to post it up in the thing here, and remove myself, and I'm just going to let you go ahead and read, and we'll go from there.
All right. The True North. I got a real. How's that now? Oh, that's better. There we go. So the True North Declaration. This is the unanimous declaration of the True North, Canada's freedom nation. Recent events in our nation's history have confirmed to citizens from coast to coast to coast that Canada is broken. Since Confederation, most Canadians believed that government respected our God-given rights and freedoms, and that the tyranny which reigned in faraway places would never find its way to our shores. But if we're truthful in recollecting our history, over the past 30 years, there have been many signs and many warnings. A little loss of freedom here and a little less of liberty there, and all the while the True North being bullied and coddled into the cage of a totalitarian state in the making. The Freedom Convoy was the last canary in the coal mine. The thousands who joined in Ottawa asking our Prime Minister to lift mandates that abridged their rights and freedoms were no fringe minority. They were instead true patriots representing millions of Canadians who had been witnessing the True North strong and free being toppled like a statue and replaced with a pillar of tyranny and despotism. For generations, it was simply assumed that our rights and freedoms were protected in our Constitution. But sadly, this assumption was mistaken, since in fact, Canadians have been subject to a great charade. This charade masks the truth that government considers our natural rights and liberties not inalienable, but merely privileges granted by Parliament under the Crown that can be readily withdrawn at the whim of government. Indeed, our Bill of Rights from 1960 recognized many liberties, but could be amended or repealed by Parliament at any time, proving that the rights purportedly recognized in the bill were in fact privileges and not rights at all. This truth was confirmed when Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau invoked the War Measures Act in 1970 and suspended the rights and freedoms of Canadians. While our Bill of Rights had a brief pretense of liberty, It birthed the Charter of Rights and Freedoms entrenched in our Constitution Act of 1982 to safeguard our liberties from the whims of Parliament. The charade of Canadian liberty ended when the Freedom Convoy 2022 was bludgeoned by Trudeau invoking the Emergencies Act. His use of violence to crush the Freedom Convoy proved yet again that Parliament is sovereign, and that, as with our Bill of Rights, the Charter is simply political sleight of hand. While the Charter proclaims our rights and freedoms, Sections 1 and 33 guarantee the supremacy of Parliament to limit those freedoms as government determines, confirming that the Charter is about privileges and not about rights. And thus, the fundamental flaw of our Constitution lies exposed. Drafted by Great Britain to ensure Parliament's sovereignty over Canadians and to serve the interests of the British Empire, it contains no recognition to the inalienable rights of Canadians. Rather, a cursory look to the past proves that for generations, government has used the Constitution to abuse Canadians. The Indian Act, the internment of Ukrainian Canadians during World War I, the internment of Japanese Canadians during World War II, forced sterilizations, the MK Ultra experiments, the Crow's Nest freight rates, the National Energy Program, ideologically driven gun control, and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's campaign to destroy the natural resource economies of Western Canada. Recent examples of continued abuses by government against the people of Canada include closing our economies, prohibiting us from tending to loved ones who were sick or dying, suspending the order of Parliament, segregating us with vaccine mandates and passports, restricting our travel within Canada, coercing us into taking experimental vaccines against our will, firing and fining us for refusing to comply with COVID mandates, refusing to acknowledge adverse vaccine effects and injury, censoring free speech regarding vaccines, COVID treatments, and policy, punishment of healthcare professionals for voicing concern regarding vaccine side effects and treatment options, invoking the Emergencies Act to crush a legal protest with violence, taking political prisoners such as Pastor Artur Pawlowski, Tamara Leach, and Pat King, freezing bank accounts of Canadians because they supported Freedom Convoy 2022, stripping our rights to freely own and use arms, censoring free speech, the internet traffic, and criminalizing communication, making lawful medically assisted suicide rather than support people in need, undermining our national sovereignty by supporting illegal immigration and the globalist agendas of the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, and the World Health Organization, tacitly supporting the efforts and ambitions of the Communist Party of China, creating massive debt, high inflation, and high interest rates, destroying our natural resource and agricultural economies, imposing massive carbon taxes, pursuing total control over our lives, including what we drive, what we eat, what jobs we have, and how we adapt in their imagined future green economy. Imposition of a digital currency and digital ID to exert complete control over the social, economic, and political lives of Canadians. It is abundantly clear that our Constitution does not recognize our inalienable rights. What instead Canadians suffer is the tyranny of Parliament that has the supremacy to suspend those rights, to appoint judges biased in support of Parliament's discretion over charter rights and freedoms, and enable federal usurpation of provincial jurisdictions, continue to repress First Nations under the Indian Act, and impose all Canadians to the lies, deceptions, and corruptions of politicians and their supporting cast of bureaucrats. As such, We Canadians vow to exercise our natural duty and moral obligation to choose the path taken by millions of patriots before us who stood for freedom in the face of tyranny. From Boadicea fighting to free her people from Roman rule over Britannia in 60 AD, the rebel barons who forced King John of England to sign the Magna Carta at Runnymede in 1215, our honored soldiers storming Juno Beach, Normandy in June 1944, the small protests against the violation of our rights with mask and vaccine mandates that began in our streets in 2020, to the Freedom Convoy 2022 that sought redress in our nation's capital. Therefore, whereas all people are created equally with naturally endowed, inalienable rights and liberties, and whereas the natural authority for the creation and legitimate operation of civil government are derived from the people, and whereas we believe that the fundamental objective of government is to preserve and enlarge the freedom of Canadians through the vigorous defense and protection of our naturally endowed rights, and whereas we believe that provinces and territories must have distinct and independent constitutions guaranteeing their greatest sovereignty within a confederation, and whereas we desire a constitution that will unite all Canadians in a commonwealth of freedom, equality, and purpose, that reserves sovereignty to the Canadian people, where all levels of government are constrained by established limits, clearly defined separation of powers, and separate representation for the people and regions of the nation. This is my favorite part.
Mine too.
This is where we get to draw a line in the sand and say, I'm in.
Right.
Therefore, we declare, we are the true north, Canada's freedom nation. And we will not surrender Canada to the political elites and their post-nationalist agenda. We believe all people are created equally in the image of God with inalienable rights and liberties, including the right to life, liberty, and personal property. We believe in the power of loving God and loving our neighbor as ourselves. We will not surrender our God-given rights to any government and would rather die as free people standing bravely in the face of tyranny than live as serfs beholden to a dictator such as Justin Trudeau. We will hold the line and not comply with any law, order, regulation, mandate, or directive from government that infringes on our inalienable rights and liberties. We will freely exercise our inalienable rights and freedoms, including the right to free speech, the right to self-defense, the right to privacy, the right to practice our faith, the right to freely associate, and the right to personal property. We possess the right of self-determination, and from this strength, we will organize a Congress of Canadians from coast to coast to coast to frame a new constitution for the nation under which sovereign provinces can unite in a federation that will guarantee the rights and liberties of the true north, strong and free, to prosper and to endure with the grace and blessings of God. Thank you.
So, thank you for that. I'll tell you, the first time that I read it was sitting around a table for breakfast, and I got choked up. And I get choked up now. Because it is that powerful. And it gives us a foundation to work with. And I think it's going to give the people a whole ton of hope.
I hope so.
And so, thank you for drawing this document up and sharing it with political entities such as the Buffalo Party that has completely embraced this and we're going to put it forward at our AGM. And obviously, our hope is, and we think it will pass unanimously, that we can take this forward, and that the Alberta Independence Party can help us take it forward, and inspire other provinces to do just that, to grab this and take it and put the power back in the hands of the people where it belongs.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think one of the, you know, we talked about the lie, we talked about the supremacy of Parliament, and we talked about, you know, the fact that all Canadians have inalienable rights and liberties. And, you know, when people understand that, you know, Parliament should bend a knee to the people, it shouldn't be the other way around. And for, you know, if we're willing to accept living in a country where our Constitution dictates whether you have rights or not, that's not a kind of country I want to live in. And so,
100%.
you know, we need change. I think one of the compelling things that conclusions that I've come to in this process is that, and this is where you're very involved with the Buffalo Party, is that provinces in this country need to be sovereign within a federation, and they're not.
Absolutely.
Every province carries water for the federal government.
Yes.
And the federal government is in every drawer of the dresser of a province's bedroom. And it ought not to be so. And I believe that, you know, the strength of the strategy behind this idea of, you know, taking an axe to the current constitution that we have, and giving Canadians an opportunity to participate in drafting a new constitution for the country, and provincially enabling political parties in the provinces that, like the Buffalo Party, that you know will begin drafting a constitution that's, you know, not going to be in line with the BNA Act.
Right.
That's what we have to do. We have to color outside the lines. We have to pursue a vision that is completely opposed to the current parliamentary system, in order to make something different that the people can actually grasp and go, you know what, this is what we want. Because Parliament's never going to change. I don't know what you think, but I don't think that it doesn't really matter what political party is in power in Ottawa. No one is going to want to change the status quo, because there's too many people have a vested interest in it.
It puts too much power into the hands of the politicians, and they love that power. The establishment loves that power over the people. And I can tell you that this sort of language will scare the hell out of them, because they'll be afraid, and that's where the opposition's going to come to this. It's going to come from the establishment, and they're going to rail against it because they don't want to lose the power over the people. And that's why this is so important, and this is going to expose so much more of our rotten, corrupt system. It's such a beautiful thing.
Yeah, so we're just encouraging people to read the document, talk about it with your friends, share it. Hopefully it's thought provoking.
So, Brenton, tell people. People are asking in the chat where they can get a hold of this document, where they can find it.
Well, it's on the it's available to copy and share off of a Facebook page called the True North Declaration. It's on Facebook, and it was posted this morning on there. And feel free to share that. We're getting set up to sell large printed copies of the Declaration to help bootstrap our project. We've already actually taken pre-orders for a whole pile of them.
Very good.
So
this is historic. This is historic. It's never been done in this country.
No, I mean, and it's kind of crazy thinking that we're sitting here having a conversation about, hey, you know, it's broken, so let's
take some action to fix it. Yeah.
Let's draft a new constitution that makes the people of Canada sovereign.
Yes.
And truly recognizes our inalienable rights. wow, that's a really kind of a radical idea. And of course,
Right.
everyone's, you know, I know it's a big endeavor, and it's actually. I was thinking this morning about John F. Kennedy's famous speech when he announced that America was going to put a man on the moon. Kind of
Right.
unheard of.
Right.
A technological wonder of the day.
Mm.
Um, but it started with the decision.
With an idea. Yeah.
Yeah, good, bad, or indifferent. They decided, hey, we're going to put a man on the moon, and and by
this.
the way, we're going to beat the Russians there too.
Right.
And so, can't be done by Brent. It can't be done by Brent and Mark.
No.
This is going to take the entire freedom movement of the country to come together and create a process out of a discussion of how to move this agenda forward.
Yeah.
Because it is about the people. You opened with that, and
100%.
it's so true.
100%.
And
this is, again, I think this is something, Brenton, that's going to inspire people. I think this flows right from the last 3 years that we've all been going through, where people are looking for something to involve themselves with, looking for something to change what we just went through for the last 3 years, up to and including the convoy. And the timing of this is perfect, and it's sort of natural and organic flow from that. And the fact that there's political parties, and of course I'm associated one, that is embracing this and wants to move this forward. I think it's a process. I think none of this is going to happen overnight.
No.
But it is a process, and I think one of the first things, as Celine mentions, that we're going to have to do is just even changing the preamble to include those 7 words. A constitution derived by the will of the people. That's just so incredibly important for that document to say. And then, move to repealing Section 1 and Section 33 that gives that supremacy to Parliament and to governments. We're on the right path. We're on the path to,
I think
really
there's a couple things that I would encourage your readers to just, if they can, take a look at the Canadian Constitution. No one's ever going to read it except people like you and me and Celine, but it's a terrifyingly large document.
Right.
And you have to commend the British because, they were masters of the use of the English language and writing words. It's interesting, by contrast, the American Constitution is a very, very, very small document.
Right.
And I would encourage your readers to have a look at the U.S. Constitution. It's not perfect by any way, and we see the result of that today. But what's interesting about the U.S. Constitution is that, in its imperfections, there's no doubt that, they managed to create the most successful free nation on earth, and they have some problems now that they're dealing with. But
Yep.
It's a very enlightening read to actually read the U.S. Constitution and absorb it. It's a lot of the issues that they have is because they made it very, very simple. And if they would have, maybe expanded on some things and added a bit more detail, they wouldn't have some of the partisan fights that they're having in the United States right now over, things like free speech or.
Well, so one of the things that Americans tell me when we're talking about this is they say make sure you include term limits, because that's a thing that they're dealing with.
Yeah.
And so there are some things, and you say it's not perfect, but it is definitely a model.
I think it's the best model that's worked globally.
Absolutely.
And I think, there's a skeleton there that's worth looking at in terms of some of the things of how they separated various branches of government. I don't think that they went far enough, especially for a complex society like we have now with finance and things like that. But I'm excited to be part of this national discussion about inalienable rights and how to create a path forward that engages the Canadian public in a process that, like you said, it's going to really kind of scare the pants off politicians, because the last thing anyone in Ottawa wants is a bunch of crazy, uneducated people from Western Canada starting to frame a constitution. Because what do we know, right?
that actually reflects the will of the people.
Well,
It's beautiful. Yeah.
It should be a people's thing, and
Yeah, 100%.
we're
Absolutely.
excited about that.
Yeah. So, I think myself and Salim are going to talk a little bit more about this tomorrow evening. You're welcome to join us if we go ahead and do that.
Sure.
But it's definitely this is all going to be a process, and part of that process is going to be educating people, and this spans left and right, people that are committed left or right or whatever.
Yes,
it spans
yes.
across all of those that dichotomy.
Well, to just interrupt, because you bring up something that is, I think, probably the most incredibly important piece of modern discourse. Excuse me. The left and right thing has driven me crazy for a long time, and one of the problems that I think about is how to bridge that gap.
Right.
Because so much of it is out of selfish interest, and some of it is, from ideological divides, and some of that may be irreconcilable. I'm not sure. I think it depends on the person and their experience. But
right.
One of the things that I hope is true. I hope that across all political spectrums, that Canadians can understand a couple of things. Number one, that in Canada, it's just a fact we do not have inalienable rights that are recognized.
Well, and that's huge.
It's a nonpartisan thing. It's just, It should be that, that's just a fact. History bears that out. Whether you supported the Freedom Convoy or not, that's irrelevant.
Right.
And the other piece and this is the foundation, John Locke referred to it as the beginning and end of civil government. Mm-hmm. And I referred to that in the declarative portion of the Declaration, is that there should be no partisan divide on the understanding and believing and holding to be completely true that all people are created equal and they are endowed with inalienable rights. 100%. We can have a discussion on what those rights consist of. Yes. Everyone's going to have a different perspective, and even regionally, people in Quebec might have a different perspective on what that looks like as to people in Alberta and Saskatchewan. But the idea that we have inalienable rights and that those should not be infringed upon, that should be nonpartisan and cut straight across party lines.
100%.
And if we can make that case, and if we can do it in a compelling way that resonates with Canadians, that is going to be the key to successfully moving forward the vision and the mission of drafting a new constitution.
So since I read this, Brenton, of course, me and Salim have had numerous conversations. I've had conversations with other people, and the overriding thing in this is we're going to get some opposition, and it's going to be very interesting to see who exposes themselves as opposed to this, because those are the people that don't want the people to have the power that they should have always had. Mm-hmm. And this is why, again, when we talk about inalienable rights, who doesn't want inalienable rights? Like who doesn't want those rights to be supreme over government?
The king, Parliament,
right? Yeah. Exactly. That's power. It. But the people, regardless of political bent, they want inalienable rights.
I hope that's true, Mark.
I mean, I'm sure there's some that it would be love the warm embrace of government, but
well, you bring up a good point, and it would be interesting to see what, I'd love to have this discussion with Jagmeet Singh.
Right. Right.
I'd love to have another.
I can't wait.
I'd love to have another discussion with Justin. I actually had a long conversation with Justin Trudeau in the Parliamentary Library a number of years ago, before he was Prime Minister. Mm. And I was there. I was in Ottawa on business, and I had some time to kill. So I love books. I love libraries. So I'm wandering around in the Parliamentary Library, and I see Justin Trudeau. So I went up to him and started chatting. We chatted for about, 35, 40 minutes. And Unfortunately, I walked away from that conversation far more unintelligent than I was when I started that
Of
conversation.
course you did.
And
Yeah.
in fact, I called my wife um, back home, and our kids were quite small at the time, and I said, "Honey," I said, "you're not going to believe who I just ran into." And she said, "Who?" I said, "Well, he's going to be a future prime minister. We know that." And I said, "I'm terrified because I just talked to the guy, and
Mm.
he's not that bright."
No.
And and it was really sad to to see, because we talked about a lot of issues on national security and the economy and
Mm.
big issues of the day, and it was like he just didn't really wasn't engaged in any of it. It was just like, yeah, this is kind of fun. And I
Right.
thought, man, we're in for a rough ride with you, man. And
100%.
but
Yep.
but seriously, I would love to have a conversation with him again and say, hey, so where are you on inalienable rights? What's your stand on
Mm.
that issue?
Mm.
What do you think that
Well,
us
I think we know where he is on that.
lowly people deserve that, or
Mm.
But yeah, I think we kind of do. But I would hope that Jagmeet Singh, he's supposed to be representing a political party that had its roots in Saskatchewan, and
Mm.
it's about hardworking people.
Mm.
Um, I kind of doubt he would agree with us, but I think that the
Well,
common person would be far more open to it. I
and
hope.
this is the thing. I can't see common people not being on board with this, and this is why I think it's so powerful. And it's something, Brenton, that I think we talk about unity. I think this is something that can unify people. This is something that can bring people together with common purpose. And I like how the declaration mentions, the globalists and the post nationalists, um,
Mhm.
because it's important, because that's obviously the enemy of our time, and so this just all moves in exactly the right direction it needs to move in, and I can't wait to start
Yeah.
pushing this forward.
Well, if we stick to what's true,
Yep.
um, and we remember to love our neighbor, you know, we all make mistakes. You and I both know that. But there's, as long as we're willing to love our neighbor as ourselves, which means we
Yes.
forgive and we move on and we keep working together. And if we can keep our message on the things that bring us together, which are our inalienable rights and freedoms, I think that
100%.
that crossing those partisan divides might be easier than we think they are.
So again, this process is going to include provincial parties embracing this and adopting this as policy, like we're going to do with the Buffalo Party at our AGM, and the Alberta Independence Party is going to do as well. And a question that somebody asked me to ask you tonight is: so are you willing, once the parties like the Buffalo Party adopt this declaration, are you willing then to allow these particular parties to change the name of the declaration so it's more in line with what the party sees as a vision? And again, that's just a question, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but
Well, I think it's a fair question. I think the vision of the declaration is and I think it would be confusing to Canadians if there was, you know, I kind of let 10 different versions of the thing float around.
mm,
I think that the important thing of the declaration is that it clearly recognizes and supports maximum provincial sovereignty
yeah,
within a federation
yeah,
as an idea.
yeah,
And I think that is the key piece that I believe is of the greatest importance in here politically for provincial parties.
mm,
Um, and then I think that whatever policy you want to put wrap around it,
yeah,
I think that that's going to be different for Alberta than it would be for
yeah,
Saskatchewan.
yeah,
But I think that taking the ideas and the concepts that are in the declaration and moving those forward in your own way, I think is that's
mm,
a natural discourse. Just like, I
right,
mean,
yeah,
I think that some people might read the declaration that I've written and go, hey, I can see John Locke in there, or I can see
mm,
some bit of Thomas Jefferson in there or whatever. But
absolutely,
so it's not about, um, I think that if political parties like the Buffalo Party want to adopt it as something that they support, I think that that's fantastic because
mm,
I personally completely support maximum provincial sovereignty. I mean, when I was younger, I still have a hat that says Republic of Western Canada. That's my age, right? Back from the 80s. And
I was like that too.
yeah, I used to, I struggled for a long time seeing a way out of this that that didn't include separation.
Yeah.
And now I've come to the conclusion that maybe there is a way to do this without separation. But
well, and I think just to echo that, I think I felt like that when I was a teenager growing up in the '80s. I was very much prepared for separation. I was there. I was on that bus. Until the Reform Party came about, and then it was like, okay, all right, well, wait a minute, this sounds like we're moving in the right direction. And then, of course, they broke my heart when they merged with the Red Tories. But in this day and age of globalism, I'm a little bit hesitant to push for separation because I don't want to see us as a small entity on the world stage being taken advantage of, like we're seeing with the Ukraine. And so I think we're much stronger as a nation in confederation, but obviously with some major changes and amendments to our constitution that again put the power back in the hands of the people. And I think that's what this does. And so this is the first step toward uniting this country.
Yeah, and I think the Buffalo Party and the Independence Party are on the right path for Alberta. I mean, I'm not saying that they should or should not separate. I'm not going to get into that conversation, but I think that pursuing, like, what province would not want to have absolute maximum autonomy and sovereignty from the federal government? Like, come on, like, really? I mean, Ontario might be the only one because they're the geopolitical center of the universe with Ottawa, right?
Right.
But I mean, and I know there's have provinces and have nots.
I can tell you, there's a lot of favor for this in Quebec. There's a lot of it.
I'm interested to see what kind of a reaction there is from Quebec, and also, and I don't want to leave this out of the conversation. I mean, I talk about it in a couple of places. This needs to be a process, and it's going to be interesting to see what transpires. But I want the First Nations of Canada to be fully 100%. Embracing this opportunity to rewrite history.
Yes.
Right. I mean,
this is a huge opportunity for them as well.
If ever there was a time to,
yes.
What, this is our chance to be heard.
Yes.
And this is our chance to make things right and stand as equals.
Get rid of the Indian Act. Property, just even the issue of property.
Well,
it's just there's so many things.
It's appalling, and we could talk about it for hours. And
we could.
And a lot of it's heartbreaking, but it's dehumanizing.
Yep.
And and the fact that, and let's just call a spade a spade. What we have in Canada is still apartheid when it comes to the First Nations people of the country.
100%.
In many, many, many ways, and it's a long time to be gone. So it's going to be interesting to have those conversations and see who sees this as an opportunity. And everyone's going to have their angle, right? I mean, it's a political world, and rightly so, because that's the engagement of human discourse.
Yep.
But I hope you're right that there's going to be interest from Quebec, because that could be
huge.
That could be a very, very huge thing.
Yes.
Can you imagine a day when Quebec and Alberta are actually partying together politically,
right?
And happy to see one another, right, in political discourse? I mean, could you imagine that day?
Well, and the people, I think, in large part, as we saw with the convoy and we saw with other Canada Day events where we did come together, and the people have no problem. It's the politicians that divide us, right? They're exactly. The ones that create that divide, because as divided, we're easily conquered. And so this is the recipe for unity. This is the recipe for putting the power back in the hands of the people. And I just love it. So
well, I'm very humbled to have the opportunity to share it. And, I had a month ago, I didn't have any really, I didn't have a clear idea of where this was going to go.
Yeah.
And very humbled that it's been receiving
Yeah,
the gratitude and the response that it has.
100%.
And I
It's
carry that
time. It's
with
time.
thankfulness.
And timing is everything. And it is time. And you've come to the table with this. And, you know, we've embraced it because we love the language and it's something that we needed for a very, very long time.
Yeah, awesome.
So thanks again, Brenton. And anytime you want to come on and talk about it, just let me know. Send me a text and we'll bring you on and
Well,
we'll have that
thank you.
discussion because it's
We are going to
important.
be, we didn't talk. It's kind of funny. You didn't ask me what my plans are,
Yeah.
and I was going to tell you. I actually didn't want to talk about them because I didn't want to burn gunpowder. Um, but you know, we we do have an overarching kind of a direction and stuff.
Yeah.
But there's an old military axiom that basically says that once you have contact with the enemy, your plan goes out the window.
Right.
And so we're waiting to see what happens. We're gathering some experienced people to put in our war room and on our board,
Yeah.
um, and we're going to see where that takes us. Are going to we're going to put some efforts into helping educate Canadians on their rights, and we think that that's the first step. What's the story that you've been in? What are your rights? What's the role of Parliament really in Canada? I think that a lot of Canadians, and I'll close with this challenge to people out there, is that, we've been exposed to the truth. Whether you didn't like the Freedom Convoy or not is irrelevant. But
Yep.
I think most Canadians at some point in the back of their head are going to, not real comfortable with some of the things that have happened in the last 3 years.
100%.
And,
Absolutely.
people need to make that decision like Neo did. Are you going to take the blue pill and go back to the way you were and just live life and everything's going to be fine? Or are you going to take the red pill and embrace reality
Right.
and participate in change? And so that's a challenge for every Canadian to answer on their own.
Absolutely. And this is one of the things, and this is why I say timing is so important with this, because coming out of the last 3 years, what that has exposed people to has been very enlightening for a lot of people. And they recognize that obviously Parliament and the provinces, as of now, are supreme and sovereign. And it's not the people. The people don't have inalienable rights. And that's where we need to go. That's the direction we have to go, naturally and organically. And this is going to flow very nicely from that. So
the funny thing is that, throughout history, these exact conversations have happened around all sorts of campfires.
they sure have.
And in the rooms of old castles in Europe, like, what are we gonna do with this King John fella? Because we have rights. He doesn't recognize them. But if you look at the history of, how Runnymede actually took place, it was a process where they had to wield political power in order to get what they wanted. And we have to do the exact same thing.
So I like to refer this really as our 1776 without firing a shot.
Wow. Well, someone said the pen is mightier than the sword.
Right, 100%.
So-
And we can. This is the beauty of this, is we can do this without firing a shot. We can do this.
If this gets remembered like that, I don't know. I'm just almost come to tears for
I hear you.
saying something like that. But
It's big.
I don't want this to be about me. I'm just an ordinary guy, and but
Well, you put together a heck of a document, my friend.
Like you, I have a heart of passion for this country.
Yes.
And it's going to be people like you and like me, ordinary Canadians,
Yes.
that have a heart
It
and
has to be.
passion for the country that changes the nation. It's
100%.
never going to be, as much as I like Pierre Poilievre or like a different politician or Maxime Bernier, the BNA Act and our Constitution Act of 1982 make it impossible for them to deliver the freedom that we want and need.
Exactly. 100%.
So yeah, it's up to us. It's up to
It
the
is up
Canadian
to us.
people.
It is up to the people. And the people can actually do this and succeed.
I think so.
And we'll get there.
Well,
Thank
thanks
you very much. Yeah, thank you very much, my friend. Anytime you want to come on, just let me know. Send me a text. We'll bring you up, and
All right.
we'll have another chat.
We'll have
All
an
right.
offline discussion too.
All
Thanks,
right.
buddy.
Sounds good, man. Yeah,
Have a
you
good day.
bet. Take care.
God bless.
You too. So, Brenton Froelich, the architect or the author of this declaration, and I'm not kidding when I tell you this. When I first read it, I choked up, and it was in my hotel room. And then I went for breakfast with a bunch of people, and we talked about all of this first. And then I asked if it would be okay if I could read it. And I got about halfway into it, and I got choked up. And the people around me at the table for breakfast got choked up. Because it's powerful. Because it's what we've always should have had. And the power should always reside in the people. And through this freedom movement that I've been giving my blood, sweat, and tears to for 5 years, always talks about putting the power back into the hands of the people. And it's not even back into their hands because we've never had it. It's putting it into their hands for the first time. Just imagine, after 150 plus years, to take on something that's going to put the power in the hands of the people where it belongs. That's huge. That's enormous. And so this is making history. This is history in the making today. And it starts today. And you guys are all part of this. And what a time to be alive. What an opportunity we have at our feet for the people to get involved, to take action, to do this, to support political parties that want to put the power into the hands of the people and have a constitution that reflects the will of the people. To me, it's such an enlightening moment in my life, because I've always been a bit of a rebel. I've always been that guy that defends freedom. Even when I was in school, in high school, when they said the girls could wear miniskirts, but the guys couldn't wear shorts, and I still went to school in my shorts because to hell with you, and got kicked out. And because my mom was a teacher, of course, she was on their side. But I've always been like that. I've always been a rebel. I've always defended people's freedoms and gotten myself in shit over it. But this is just such a moment in my life that I can be part of this transformation and moving and putting the power back into the hands of the people. Giving them the opportunity to do that is enormous. And huge kudos to Brenton Froelich for creating this, and to Salim Mansour for taking part in, in that process. And me and Salim have been on this for a while. We've been talking about this, and we found a way. So here we go. This is it. Yes, definitely watch the replay. You guys, do me a favor, share this out. And if you want to check out the declaration itself, it's on the True North Declaration on Facebook. Go there and check it out. It'll probably at some point, once it's adopted by the Buffalo Party as policy, it'll be up on the Buffalo Party website, Independence Party of Alberta website, and of course I may see if I can put it on the Forum for Canadian Sovereignty website as well. And so here it is. This is the starting point. Let's make some history. Let's change the world. All right. I love each and every one of you folks. And that's going to be a wrap for tonight. Thanks to everybody on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Rumble, DLive, and TikTok. We got this. We really do. We got an enormous opportunity, and we got to run with it. Let's make it happen. All right. Ciao, folks. We'll see you next time. Me and Salim will be on tomorrow night. We'll probably talk about this a little bit more. All right. Ciao for now. And remember, globalism bad, nationalism good. All right. Ciao.